going to try to speed through this. There's, I don't know, it's self-deprecation, but there's a lot to cover. And I left room to potentially do another one of these if we're open to it in the future. But yeah, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm currently the CMO of Valuer, Valuer.ai. So you've probably seen a bunch of us running around over the span of the last couple of days. We basically connect startups with corporations. My background, I've co-founded 6 and some change startups. And I don't have enough time to cover all 6 fuck-ups, so this will be a bit of like kind of the making of all of those. I have 12 years of marketing experience, basically have been doing a little bit of everything in terms of growth hacking, marketing, sales, you name it, I've done it. It's kind of part of wearing different hats as somebody that's been in the startup scene. We've all been there. I do a ton of teaching. So I teach the 2-day masterclass on growth hacking over at Talent Garden. It's not the cheapest thing on 2 wheels, but I promise it's actually worth it. And by the way, I don't get a cut of that shit. I get like a one-time fee, so it is what it is. I do a ton of teaching over Google, ITU, DTU, CBS, KU, and more. So by all means, if there's something in here that you like, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You'll get the slides for free. I connect with everybody. I've already kind of talked about Valuer, so I'm going to speed through that. A couple of quick mentions. Architecture Quote is my side project. If you know anybody that's looking to fund or architects, hit me up. Clint Marketing, a lot of the growth hacking that I do is just for the world, and here you go, it's free. But I also need to make some money on the side, so that's part of my agency. And TaylorRyan.io, I don't do kids' parties, and you'll see why, because my language. But yeah, so that's it. So my goal for today is to provide value. A lot of my presentations take a bit of a twist in terms of I like doing a lot of highly nerded out technical marketing and showing different tools to break systems, how to take advantage of certain circumstances. This is a bit more of almost a motivational type thing and gives you some insight into the craziness that is me. I normally like to kind of feel out the audience. I'm just curious, like how many people have worked in startups before? Everybody, almost everybody. Cool. How many people have founded one? Just out of curiosity. Shit. All right, cool, awesome. So I always kind of start with this slide. The idea is essentially I look at growth hacking in general or marketing as kind of a whole as doing the work. The idea is that if your car breaks down in the middle of the day and you have to bring it to a mechanic, 2 different types of people that are at the mechanic shop. One is somebody that's read every book over the last 5 years of how to fix a car. The other guy has dirt underneath his fingernails and has fixed every single piece within that automobile. I want the second guy to fix my car because he's actually done the work. And I think it's kind of a nice interlude into my next slide, which is kind of the whole theme of this thing. It's the concept of marketing is all about understanding systems. And once you understand one system, you can apply it to all the others. You know how to do content, you can figure out SEO. If you know SEO, you can start getting on the analytics side. If you understand that, you can do SEM. The whole idea is success begets success. But that's why we're all here. We also have to fuck stuff up, and that's how we learn. So I'm taking you through a bit of a journey. This is kind of going through the early years and kind of what my background looks like. So every season there was a hustle, right? And the idea was in wintertime I was shoveling snow. Spring was kind of bummer season because there wasn't a lot of yard work to do. I tried knocking on doors, like, can I do maid service? And be like, get the fuck out of here. So like at age 8, that was kind of the jam. Lemonade stands, mowing lawns. The idea was at fall, it was all about raking leaves. And I did a little bit of umpiring starting at the age of 9, which you have to imagine parents are really into sports in the United States and screaming at a 9-year-old. Like, I'm thinking about that now at the age of 33. I'm like, the fuck is the matter with these people? But hey, that's the US for you. So it's one of those things, I always kind of had the hustle mindset, and the idea was multifold. The idea was I wanted to get involved in something that gave me a little extra cash and do something cool. And some of the takeaways that I took from that I think are actually really profound the more that I thought about it. So the values of feeling like a hard day's work and actually accomplishing something was super important to my growth. Being able to negotiate prices, and every time I went to the same houses, I'd come back and be like, it's $1 more this week. And they'd be like, get the fuck out of here, kid. And like every once in a while I'd be like, okay, fine, but you can't raise prices on me again. 2 weeks later, it's like, it's $2 more now. I mean, we gave you a discount. Sales, prospecting, and marketing. But one of the things that really struck me that I think are super interesting is understanding how to work with co-founders. So I understood that my friends didn't like pushing lawnmowers. They lived basically a mile away or 2.2 kilometers. So I had to push my dad's lawnmower that barely worked all the way down to their neighborhood to get them up out of their houses to mow lawns with me. I needed to do the hard work first in order to get them to come on board. And one of the more profound things that's kind of reflected now is these values weren't taught to me as an 8-year-old. I think I learned them in kindergarten. So there's this really fascinating little book called All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. I just want to share a couple of the main points. So point number 1, share everything, right? So the idea was, look, we're all in this together, equal pay. Even though it was, me paying for the gas, I needed these guys to come with me, because if you're sweating it out on a really hot summer day, 40 degrees out where I come from, Virginia, and you're sitting there pushing this mower through thick grass, it's always fun to look over and make a face at your buddy, and it makes the day go that much faster, right? Play fair, right? I didn't believe in taking an unequal cut because these guys were doing the same work that I did. And I thought that it was somewhat reasonable to say, look, this old bitch over here can't afford to get the grass mowed, but let's do it anyways. And my friends were like, no, I just gotta pay. And I'm like, what are we doing? Like, it's fine, it's a townhouse, it'll take 10 minutes. Put things back where you found them, right? And the idea was we had to clean up the mower, otherwise it would rust. And the idea of changing the oil was something that was foreign to my buddies, but it takes 2 seconds. Don't take things that aren't yours. Lots of opportunities to steal when you're in somebody's backyard. And obviously it was one of those things I'm like, nah guys, we can't. Say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. So I used to really get amped up because I'm like, guys, it's Saturday, it's our day to mow lawns. We're like, but fucking video games. And I'm like, fuck your video games, let's go. And unfortunately, sometimes I said things that were hurtful and really messed up the whole business relationship. And I had to come back and be the bigger guy and be like, I'm sorry, look, like, I need you. And I didn't really need them, it just made the day go better. And the last 2 are kind of fun. Wash your hands before you eat. And the last one is flush. So, it was one of those things that I learned at a very early age to stay late. A lot of good stuff happens late. I learned that as an adult too. Stay later when you go to bars. But stay late and you get ahead. So it was one of those things I learned within elementary school that if my parents picked me up a little later, I could learn how to use video cameras. By the time I got into high school, I learned what a Casablanca was. This was basically an early version of almost reel-to-reel editing. So I started learning how to do video production at the age of 13. By the age of 15, I was already charging people to basically do like wedding shit, simple stuff on Adobe Premiere 6.0, like super old, right? Based off of that, I got an internship at the age of 16 and basically got screwed out of money for an entire summer. And essentially, it was a good learning opportunity for me. After that, I basically became an audiovisual expert and was employed by AVX, Audiovisual Experts. And I was getting flown all throughout the country to basically do video stuff. And they're like, you're the guy? And I'm like, I'm the guy. So Tampa, Portland, a bunch of other places. Boston was a trip. And after that, I won Student of the Year 2003 and 2004. So I was a go-getter. I was super into this shit. And for a long time, I wanted to do video as a career. I made the mistake of going down to visit a video school, and it was a bunch of people in berets and black turtlenecks talking with their eyes closed. And I'm like, same, but very different. And it was a great experience because I could have gone on a completely different path. Douchebags. So some of the takeaways from that, I think getting real professional skills versus dabbling, there's a big difference. And I feel like you can still make every hobby into something that you actually enjoy, but is also payable work. And it's tough, right? Like it's really hard to take something that is just fun, but you also have a vocation in it. And that's kind of part of the whole gig economy. How many people are doing that, by the way? How many people are on Upwork? Nobody? Damn. Okay, Upwork, it's basically like a freelance platform. You get paid money to basically do shit on the side. We'll talk later. So I learned managing people was tricky. So being a 17-year-old and talking to other 17-year-olds and having people like, you're not my fucking dad. And it's like, I'm trying to help. You have to realize that you have to be very delicate with people. And that's a managerial kind of skill set that you can only learn through doing. And for those that have managed people, you remember probably the first few months, years of doing it. It's awkward and weird and all that good stuff. So I realized that more work opened more opportunities, and I was able to actually charge for stuff. And then came the colossal clusterfuck that was graduating in December of 2008, which if you read this chart, the giant middle finger right there is my demographic. right? So that's males within my age group that graduated in 2008 that were either between the age of 20 and 29. Essentially, 1 out of 4 plus of us was unemployed, which means there are no entry-level jobs, no jobs in general. And that means you got to do something different in order to stay relevant. And oh, by the way, I had a degree in psychology, which means I can work with old people with dementia, which, you know, I think it's very, that's a fucking terrible job. I'm sorry. It's a tough job. I couldn't do that, right? Or kids with autism. So there were lots of fake jobs out, and I'll kind of go into some details on that. I really love Denmark for this reason. I came out with a student loan payment of $500 every month. That comes out to $45,000 total that I owed as a fresh out of school student. My requirement is to start paying that within the first month of graduation. So high-fiving everybody, and then, by the way, you owe us a shitload of money. Paid that off 2 years ago, right? It's starting with a giant mountain of debt that you can't get out of, and you can't declare bankruptcy to get out of that. I love Denmark for the reason that they actually let people get into an economy without having a giant monkey on their back. So some of the takeaways was giving up wasn't an option, right? But I can't just like fold it up and be like, well, fuck it, life's over, like I'm screwed. No, like you have to figure out ways around this. Understanding humble pie and doing shit jobs that nobody ever wants to do is part of the dance. And understanding I'll eat shit now to eat caviar 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now. I'm gonna get there, but I have to do this. One of the more interesting books that I've ever read is Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Has anybody read it? Awesome book, right? And he highlights the people that essentially came out of school or entered the job market during the Great Depression. Those people never got back to anything that was in a semblance of the competitiveness and the range in terms of their career after they endured the first kind of few years of struggling. Because it's self-doubt, it's all kinds of fucked up, and it's a messed up environment to be in. And it's one of those things, if anybody here is born basically before 1985, we all have this version of this story. I'm gonna need you to finish your story real quick so I can tell you how the same thing happened to me, but it's more interesting because I'm in it. We've all been there. For those that are a little older that have experienced that. And by the way, the next one's coming. Like, it's coming hard and fast. 2 years from now, we're gonna have very different conversations about what this process was of 20 years of stability. It's coming, and that's scary. That was what part of my last talk was on AI and content. So during these rough times, I picked up crazy, shitty, awful, and also cathartic, you know, almost this Nietzschean kind of mindset of these awful jobs. So I was a door-to-door salesman. So I had a giant, this size, a giant window in one hand and a kit of glass to basically show, hey, this is gonna save you money in the long run. And I would sit in living rooms for 3 hours on end until they literally threw me out and grabbed my shit and threw it, or I made a deal. And I gotta tell you, it was really difficult to make a deal as a pimply-faced 19-year-old, but every once in a while it worked out. So I did 2 to 3 meetings on Saturdays and 2 normally during the week. This was a good day, so sold 2 leads, $21,000 worth of windows, and doors in one day. Ask me how drunk I got tomorrow, woo! And that was the last time I took a sip of whiskey. I switched to vodka, and I gotta tell you, the cops can't tell when you're drunk. No, I'm kidding, but I'm gonna get weird tonight. Like, it's been a crazy 2 days. So after that, I ended up meeting this guy super randomly that sold barrels. Barrels, like wine barrels, but small versions all the way up to the big ones that you see in like the distilleries and wineries. And so he's like, look, I can't pay you anything other than commission. What else are you gonna do? And I'm like, yeah, let's dance. So that's a picture of me at a balloon festival in North Carolina. I made $40 after gas and food on that trip. But there was a really cool couple that was like, hey, have you ever had moonshine? I'm like, yep, but what do you got? So that was fun. So I learned a lot about myself and also some of the side hustles that are inside of side hustles. So I explained, are you familiar with affiliate models? Do you know what a dropship campaign is? No. Like, are you using Aweber, Constant Contact? No. Within 3 months, I was using his platform, his product, to basically move 10,000 MRR of barrels every month. And I think they're still on some of the sites. One of them was dressedlikeapirate.com. So if you look them up, they're still there, and it's still the same shit website. But essentially, if you're a pirate and you like dressing like one, you can get one of those little barrels, and I don't know, people are weird, right? So it's a thing. So like some of the side hustles that I had, they don't do it out here. It's not a big deal, but Craigslist. So I had a shit beater, a really ugly Ford Ranger pickup truck, really small. But when somebody would say, hey, I'm trying to get rid of a washer dryer, I'd be like, all right, I'm coming right now. Can I come by and grab it? Sure. So I basically pick it up, bring it home, put a little shine on it, and then sell it for $200, $300, $400. And people would come by, does it work? Sure does. No idea. And a lot of times you end up making a fair amount of scratch on that. The next thing was actually a ton of fun. The Clean White Smile, that's this one. Essentially, it was one of those things we saw. It was the same business partner of mine when we started our own home remodeling business. We saw that there was a lot of potential money. We met a couple of guys that were basically just building tanning salons. And it's this really bizarre thing. If you're into kind of the aesthetics and you want darker skin, maybe you want whiter teeth. So we hit up manufacturers out in China, and this is before Alibaba. So the idea of calling up these places like English, and you go through like 15 different manufacturers until you finally get somebody on the phone. And then you'd have to order a minimum of 100, right? Because the pricing didn't make sense. And we eventually got stuff going, and this was one of our trade shows we did in Miami. We essentially made all our money back, and $5,000 went missing. And my buddy, business partner's girlfriend, had a brand new purse. So you do the math. Really interesting side story. So he's now started a cult, and he also sells ayahuasca trips. So if anybody wants to check out Omar, I'll introduce you. Super bizarre. Some of the fun adventures from selling barrels. This was the guy who threw up on my tent. These are some of the barrels. This is grown-ass men in dresses playing the drums. Kidding. This was the miniature horse that got in a fight with a donkey right next to me. Like, they had a petting zoo next to my tent. Like, shit sucks. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, it's not like other people were like, hey, get out of there. We can give you a real job. It wasn't there, right? So some of the takeaways from this stuff, right? Even failures brought new opportunities. And the idea of understanding, like, cool, I know how this entire business model works because this guy who's leading the charge is a total fuck up. And I guarantee you I could do a better job of it if I just tried. So being a bad boss is also a choice. I realized that early on too. There's two different ways to handle somebody messing something up on the job. One is some of the bosses that I had that screamed at me, called me stupid, and a million times over basically treated me like a child. And I realized, again, nobody's perfect. And the give a shit factor of somebody that is either a founder or owns the company, very different for somebody that's just trying to make a paycheck. And you have to understand that. And again, I've had so many bad bosses, but I've also had a few good ones. Selling something before you buy it is super crucial. When we were doing the teeth whitening solution, we met with so many different people, and we basically got orders on the road before we actually had anything in possession. And that totally worked out for us. You don't need permission to do the right thing, right? And I see that now. When I have marketers, and by the way, 30 marketers over at Valor, we are a colossal entity because I love teaching people. I love giving people the chance that I didn't have. And the idea is if you're moving full speed and you fuck up doing the right thing or trying to do the right thing, hey, no problem. Like, it's not a big deal. Who the fuck am I? Right? And that's something that I want to instill in other people because nobody told me that until it was way late in my career. So, learning by failure sucks, and I don't know why it's like idolized in this system. Like, this was like 4 years of just, whoa, it was rough. But there is a lesson to be learned in every situation. So I definitely believe in making your own luck. I think people that depend on it are full of shit. And the idea is that you put yourself out there enough times, knock on enough doors, kick in enough doors, and essentially something will pan out. You only really need one good chance. So I won a 2012 TAP program. It's the Transition Assistance Program. The only reason that we won was my business partner was a disabled vet, basically no hearing in his right ear from a firefight in Desert Storm. But we won this contract. Love the guy to death. One of the best mentors I've ever had. Got stoned before we walked into the meeting to negotiate. It was absolutely absurd. And we delivered a hell of a product. And it was one of those things that spun off to a lot of unique circumstances, and we helped a lot of people. Getting to meet guys that, the reason that you have to take this is you've been given a pink slip. Essentially, you're fired from the military. And when you think you're going to have 30 years and then retire and basically chill, that's not the case anymore. It's like, thanks for your service, son. Here's the door. Or, I know you're disabled, but hey, you got to get out of here. Which is pretty wild. So you get to meet passionate people that want to do something with life that are just a little behind the times or a little confused. This opened up an opportunity to do political finance consulting. If you want to meet some real scumbags, go into politics. I kid you not, it is bizarre. Like, you have this weird belief that these people are altruistic. They're scumbags, like, through and through. This is a map of the 2012 election. So everything in red was the team that beat us. So all the blue was essentially like, hey, way to go, Democrats, rah, rah, go us. Basically, we got Obama elected. My business partner, Scott, was in the picture like during inauguration. It was awesome. And then he called me the next day to say, hey, you sitting down? I'm like, I'm not out of bed yet. And he's like, cool, you're fired. So, tough luck. See you in 2 years. This was us launching one of our mobile apps. So I basically joined up with a couple of guys because I was doing a fair amount of consulting in terms of SEO, CRO, ASO. These are search engine optimization. ASO is app store optimization. Basically teaching people digital marketing stuff. One of my favorite ones was a company called Wedding Wire. I haven't checked up on them in a long time, but I basically helped them rank their app first for the wedding niche. And seeing a rocket ship take off while you're sitting on the ground sucks, right? Those guys cleared something to the effect of like 250 million in their last round of funding, and I haven't seen a cent. So it was one of those things of, hey, you still want to no, we learned from you, we're good. So lesson learned from that. And the last one down here was basically part of our mobile app development firm. We worked with Kellogg's, but how the fuck does like a cereal need an app? Right? It was the weirdest thing, and this was during the craze of like apps. We put out an app that essentially helped people that had food allergies find delicious foods that they could purchase and have it sent to them on the app. It was a terrible fucking idea, right? But we were dead set on doing this, and we did launch, and this was like our celebration thing. We found out very early on some of the lessons that come from that. So, takeaways. Takeaways, it's kind of like this Louis C.K. Quote. I know that he's like kind of a scumbag in the news, but honestly, like, the guy actually has a lot of thoughtful, insightful ideas. So if you're watching The Matrix, there's this great scene where Neo's in a fight on the roof, and Trinity needs to go save him. So she hits up Tank, the guy back at home base, and says, I need you to basically upload how to fly a helicopter. And the idea is, that's essentially what learning is now. It's not a direct upload, it's time. Anything is teachable at this point. Any one of us could be the best developer if we gave a shit and actually took the time to learn. Anybody can do what I do. I'm not particularly special at all. I just give a shit, right? And I want to do more and more and more, because every time that I learn something new, somebody's flipped me a flashlight in a dark room and I get to explore more. I love that shit. And I hope that you find something similar too, because that's what it's all about. I found that asking the right questions when building a product, super important. So the word actually has an effect. So when we ask people, would you use this product? They're like, yeah, of course, it's great, sounds good. Would you actually use this product? Well, no, of course not. I mean, like, I don't have time for that. It's stupid, right? Didn't know. And that's one of those things you can never get right unless you ask people on a really human level. Well, the last point was just basically good timing. Some of the people that have these amazing jobs came about during the right time. Maybe somebody had left the company, there was a gap, you found the hiring manager on a good day, and they're like, fuck it, come on in. That shit didn't happen to me for a really long time. And I think it's just fair to say that just because things haven't worked out in the last month, year, decade, doesn't mean it's not going to work out tomorrow. It's just something to think about. So I, again, believe in making your own luck and double downing on everything that I've already talked about. So I started as a strategy manager over at the Washington Post, and this was one of those jobs that, I don't know if you guys have ever done this, where you take a job and you're like, well, I didn't really want this job, but I had to get out of doing like shit. And as soon as you're in it, you're like, God damn it, like this sucks, And so I did that for basically a year and 9 months. But during the meantime, I went to a networking event every other day. So it was basically 2 to 3 networking events for 2.5 weeks. So this is just a little collage of the shit. So like big data, I'm like, sure, that sounds cool. Like, what's up? So it was like Tyler Durden / like Edward Norton in Fight Club. It's like, this is cancer, right? Let me come in. It was one of those things. This was one of my favorite ones. So this is NortonNet. It's only specific to Washington, D.C. These are people that are only allowed in with top secret clearance or top secret poly, which means you need to take a polygraph test. And essentially everybody within your network needs to say, yeah, he's not a terrorist, or He's not a bad guy. So I just started sneaking into these because I'm like, fuck it, I want a different job. Nobody said shit, but I had gone to 6 months of these and nobody was willing to hook me up. If you can take a look at the demographic, lots of gray-haired dudes. Nobody was willing to take a chance on me. And I kept reaching out to these people relentlessly, finding their phone numbers online and calling them like, hey, I see that you're in defense contracting. I'd love to get into that. Bullets and bombs, love them. No fucking chance. It's a thing. That's big business out there. Let me tell you. So I said fuck it on the last one. I dressed as a captain. I'm like, hey, anybody want to hire a yacht salesman? They didn't even let me in. So fuck it. So some of the takeaways that I learned from that, honestly, wearing weird shit actually gets you noticed more, and I think it's actually a kind of a cool little hack. But events are free education. And I think, honestly, and it's no offense to the organizers if there's anybody in here for TechBBQ, but assholes do panels. All right, sorry guys. Enjoy the panel. So, no, it's one of those things. It takes 0 time to prepare for a panel. It's riffing. And, you know, I don't care if you're an amazing musician, you still have to practice. You have to know what you're getting up there to do. And most of these people are professional bullshit artist riffers. The idea is that if you have 100 people in a room, right, and it's a half an hour speech, the idea is that you're potentially wasting 50 hours collectively of everybody in that room. You didn't take 5 minutes to put together a presentation? This is 4 hours worth of work. I give a shit. Because I don't want to bring something that brings no value and makes people stomp their feet going, fuck that guy. He wasted 30 minutes of my time. I know how important my time is. I assume you guys have stuff to do too, but you're sitting here. You know, the idea is nobody will push you like yourself. I like your quote earlier, by the way, like, who's rooting for me other than me? You know, like, I totally dig that. You know, and one of the things, if you have any aspirations of doing something greater than yourself, whether it's public speaking or mentorship, use people that are bad at what they do as inspiration. I've seen so many dumb fucks on stage, I'm like, why does that guy have that job? It's like, well, you can just go ask. I'm like, what, for real? Like, yeah, you know, and you're in, you know, and that's part of the jam. So, you know, sometimes it makes more sense just to ask. I don't know, you know, I think one of those things that I tend to kind of talk about, but I don't know, it's weird in the Danish ecosystem. I use a lot of negativity to fuel me. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I got a little anger streak in me. And it's one of those things that I find that using being fired, using having a shit job, using losing time at an event where somebody's riffing, fuck that, it gives me more energy to be like, cool, I'm gonna do better than them, or I'm gonna surpass them, or I'll show you. And I kid you not, that's been a fire underneath my ass, right? I've been fired 3 times in Denmark. I know what the fuck I'm doing. Probably not because I'm easy to get along with, but no, I think it's one of those things. I have a different disposition than a lot of other people. And sometimes that doesn't gel well. But the idea is essentially using these negative things to propel you. Maybe it's job search. So essentially every negative answer, every unfortunately, or the email starts with, we regret to inform you, use that as propellant to basically go, cool, now I have to apply for 3 more jobs. Every no I get means I need 3 more applications. And it's just a different way of gamifying the system. So that essentially kind of gets me towards the end. A couple of just small thoughts. There is a big difference between a good and a bad boss. I remember one of my first bosses over at Nortel, terrible name, it was called Kids Online. And they were putting the education and entertainment, so they called it edutainment. And I was like, whoa! Like, they thought that was innovative. It's fucking idiots. But I remember, you know, I was doing a lot of video work, and so I was explaining to one of the guys that was doing content, I'm like, I think we would get a much better shot because the lighting, the sun's right there, if we could angle over here. And he goes, we don't pay you to think. Oh, and by the way, we don't pay you at all. And he starts laughing with his dickhead buddies. That was 17 years ago, and I still remember that shit. You'd be surprised how a little pointed comment, like, it sticks with you, and that's fucked up, right? Like, that shit still bothers me. And it's one of those things, I'll never do that to somebody. And if I do, I'm immediately like, I'm so sorry, you know, but sometimes, you know, you catch me on the wrong day, but I'm not screaming at anybody and I'm not putting anybody down. You know, and I do think remembering those negative feelings, like, oh, I know what that feels like, to remember it's not cool to do that shit. The last little bit is just kind of for me, you know, all this stuff takes time, it takes energy. If anybody ever tells you, oh no, it's just 3 months, it's just 6 months, especially within SEO, they're either selling something or they're full of shit. Because honestly, all this stuff takes time. There is no person that just pops up out of nowhere and all of a sudden they're rich beyond their wildest dreams. All this stuff takes figuring out, breaking shit, losing your patience, and unfortunately finding that, fuck-ups are okay. And that's part of the jam. So that is just about it for me. One of the founders of Architecture Quote. If you're interested in learning more about growth hacking, what I can do for your business, happy to talk to you about Clinton marketing. Taylor Ryan I don't do kids parties. And Value, where we connect startups with corporations. I work 7 days a week. If you ever want to come hustle with me, feel free to let me know. Girlfriend doesn't love that I work 7 days a week, but ultimately something good will come from it. But yeah, that's it.